Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. Here we are, starting in March, starting a new series.
Phenomenal series.
Covenant.
I think everybody's going to be excited about.
Yeah, it's going to be quite exciting. And how are things been going for you and Dan? And I know a lot of cool stuff with. You're starting to experience being an empty nester because your daughter's taking some time off.
We had a weekend of practice being an empty nester. Anna was away at a retreat for a weekend. And so we had the house all to ourselves the entire weekend, which usually when we think the house is to ourselves, we get a text or a phone call from Caleb saying he's bringing a crew of college friends home. So this was the first weekend in a while that I think it's actually truly been an empty nest.
Yeah.
But lots of fun. Yeah. God is good. He is showing us new seasons ahead and kind of giving us a glimpse into that. It was a good weekend though. Definitely. I tell you,
yeah,
fun stuff going on.
I had a interesting, slight mistake that I made, but God resolved it. We're taking our leaders over to Croatia this year. That's open.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that. Be on the Adriatic Sea, and nobody's ever been there.
No one on the retreat has been?
No. So it'll be a spectacular with great. They got great castles and churches and.
Yeah. Dan spent time in Croatia when he was in the military and said it was stunningly beautiful.
Yeah. That's cool. So, I've gotten the tickets and everything's settled. And Linda, said, "Hey, let's go over our calendars to make sure that I know what's going on with." We got some cool stuff we're doing. We're taking Joshua and Aiden and his family to a NASCAR race in Austin.
Fun!
And so that's
right up your alley.
Joshua's into that, and of course I like speed. And then we're also going with Dave Dunkel and Melissa and his kids in May to the Formula One race, which is Aiden's favorite thing.
Wow! And now where is that?
That's in Miami.
In Miami, okay.
So we're going to that. So anyway, these are we got things going on, and I'm going to do some training for C12 and. Be with Joshua and all that and Aiden. So we're going through the calendar.
Right.
Hey, I'd like to go through the calendar. Okay, what's happening again in March, April, May? And I said, okay, we're leaving for Croatia on the 17th. And she says, did you plan for Joshua's graduation? Because remember, she said you got to make sure.
Right.
Plan for Joshua's graduation. It's like, no.
Oh no! What is his graduation?
Well, that was the issue. It's like, we could be in Croatia during his graduation, which because of everything that's already set up and committed to. If that was true, we couldn't go. We couldn't go to the graduation, and she was not happy. Let's say.
I can understand that. I can see that from Linda.
I thought you were gonna focus, and it slipped my mind. It's like, I know he's graduating, but I didn't put it together of, hey, by the way,
right.
it could be during this trip, So,
that's part of why we're not able to go.
So
actually, is timing of graduation for Anna.
So I said, okay, let me work on it. So I called Peter, and when's the graduation? Well, it's the 19th, which is Thursday. So that means we could go and then leave Friday and go to Croatia. And everything would be fine.
Oh, good.
But the tickets are already bought, So, is that possible? Because now we're going to leave from Dallas, not from Denver, and
rewriting tickets and all that.
And so I go online and work on it. And it's like, if you make this change, it's going to be very expensive to make this change. But we got to go to how are we going to do that? I said, Father, what do I do? He said, well, call up United and talk to a real person. Okay. Okay. So I call. I get up early, actually, when they're not going to be busy, and so I call them and I said, here's my problem, here's my issue, and I got to change it from Dallas to there, blah blah blah. And he said, okay, let me work on this. And so he's working on it, and it comes up because he's got the same computer I've got, basically. He said, oh, that's going to be kind of expensive. He said, let me work on this, and I'm going to call the supervisor at what they call the rate desk, and see what we can do. So he says it's going to take a little bit of time, so just you hang on here, and there'll be music and playing, but don't hang up. Okay. Right. So he comes back on about 15 minutes later and says, I'm still working on it. Don't hang up. I'm still working on it. So comes back another 10 minutes. He said, okay, we got it done for you. It's going to cost you an extra $102.
Oh, excellent. Good.
We got it done. You can do this. So I'll make all the changes, and we'll be able to get it done for you and Linda. And you can leave from Dallas on Friday, get there actually Saturday morning, so we'll get ahead of time. Usually we go ahead just to get
right. You've got preparations to do and need to kind of get your bearings
make
and
sure
everything.
The rooms are all good, and we actually kind of walk around and see the restaurants, and
fine.
So we're going to have to trust God for more than we normally do, but but we'll get there now. And I went to Linda and said, we're going to Joshua's graduation. And so she was thrilled.
So you were out of the doghouse then.
I was out of the doghouse. And it was cool. It was just cool how God, can, even with our inadvertent things that we kind of slip up on by not paying attention, that I can take care of this, which is actually in a sense the essence of what we're going to be studying about the covenant. Is how about now I can take where you are with messes and issues and things that you've messed up on. I can make it work because I'll bring favor to you, and I'm gonna the covenant, which we're going to get into, is I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing, and and there's no limit to that. And the reason that you and I are going to do this series is that we've gone through the fundamental abiding. We just did that at Refresher course. We've gone through discerning God's will. We've done a process of overcoming worry, fear, and anxiety. And as we did that, more and more people express that it's tough to be motivated in believing that what's going on in the world, or what's going on with the uncertainty of life, or the pressures of life, and the ridiculous culture of life, and the anger that people have toward the authorities and the government and things that are happening, and the fact that there's supply chain issues and their businesses are different, and is when you say, hey Rich, you say covenant, it seems hard to believe that.
Yeah. This is going to be fun as we talk about it. I've shared with you recently, God just really, what I say, showing off lately, but teaching Dan and I the specificity with which he wants to lead us into things in navigating some of the difficulties, and how he just delivers with his favor. And so I have a whole slew of examples over the last couple of months that he just kind of keeps showing off with. So as they fit in, I'll try to share some of those. But it really is amazing to me, the detail with which his eye and his hand is in our lives. And when we are simply tuned into asking and then surrendered to following what he says, we get to watch him show off and truly deliver the covenant.
Yeah. And one of which I know that you shared with us was, and you've told the story, which was about your heart and obedience, about your father's. Your father has passed away, and he had a house that needed to be sold, you were asked, by God to go down and take care of it, and you said,
Yep.
I really don't want to.
I don't want to. Do I have to?
I don't want it because it's messy. It's going to be hard, and God says, no, are you willing to surrender? I'm doing some things that you don't understand. And you worked through that and surrendered and went and actually had it sold.
Yep.
And what happened?
Well, and that fell through.
Yeah.
With some different things that went on, did fall through. And then God brought in, it was funny because and we were believing him for this. He had promised that there was a buyer out there that whoever was going to be coming in, it was truly going to be a blessing to them, and they would be excited for this house, and it would be kind of a new generational thing for them. And lo and behold, the buyer that he did bring right behind this one that fell, we did hit multiple delays along the way, but it just closed the other day. So the house has been sold. And the woman who bought it has a very young family and is so excited. I mean, she's genuinely just thrilled to be stepping into this house that I could not wait to get rid of.
Yeah.
And it's just sweet to see his faithfulness in that. And then there's just, there's other things that we're watching and believing for that he has promised. And I know, he had us go through that house when we did go through and clean it and ready it for the next family. He had us anoint the doorways and pray over it and pray blessings over the family that would come in, believing it was a family. And sure enough, it is. So I'm excited to, not that I'll really keep up with them, but I know that he's got beautiful things in store for them. So
yeah. So what does that tell you as the, here's your assignment. I'm doing things that you don't quite understand. And of course, you thought it was all sold, which is like hallelujah,
right?
And then it fell through,
right?
What does all that show you, even about the covenant in that scenario where, I thought the blessing was to get this sold.
Right.
And then it's not sold, and that now what? How did you understand all that in terms of God's life for you?
So even in that, you have taught us well to go back in that and ask God, okay, what are you saying now? What about now?
Yeah.
And he revealed there's some issues with the house that need to be resolved. And honestly, had we not really looked into that, it wouldn't have been the blessing that it was intended to be for the next family. So we were able to do some things to dry the house out, and there were some windows that needed to be tended to, and it brought highlight to that. And actually not something we even were required to do on that, but it let the new buyers know, because now they had this information that this was something they were going to have to do, and it just made it more of a blessing for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and and see, that's what we have to keep understanding, is that God's will is His will, and that's why He knows He knows timing. And we keep thinking, this is as we get into the covenant here, I'm arranging all these things
right
in my timing and with specific people, like you said, this lady with her children. See, he already knew. Well, right. I want to bless them. It's them I want to bless.
Oh, there's another element of this that I forgot to ever share.
Yeah.
So the other thing, we left when we cleaned the house, God had laid on our hearts to leave it staged. My dad had some beautiful furniture in there that we were going to try to sell or donate or something, but to leave it looking nice, to remove a lot of the stuff, but leave the pretty things. And he was so, they were important to him. He was proud of the way the house looked, and we were able to get it to look back to the way it had when he first got it, and he had those furnishings in there and stuff. So it looked nice. But lo and behold, the second buyers that came, part of the contract is that they actually loved all of his furniture, and we sold it to them. So we did not have to go back and move any furniture out of the house. How cool is that?
That is cool. And they received something they wanted.
And they received a blessing.
I'm sure
exactly.
I'm sure you did it at a big discount for what they could have bought.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. But that was part of getting to bless them, is, because he would have loved to know that they actually found value in what he had put together for the house.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're going to try to set up, is that, see, the covenant is God's life with us. And he just says, stay with me, even when in the middle of it doesn't look like it's happening the way that you thought it was going to happen.
Exactly.
Well, I'm doing some more things because, and this is what we're going to try to get through is I'm going to bless to be a blessing. Is it's a flow through that. Yes, I want to bless you, but by the way, there's the other side of it, and I'm working that too, which he did in this case, so that he's saying, don't fret about it. Just watch and wait and experience and know that. And it's not generic. It's not like, well, the next party, maybe they'll like it, maybe they won't.
Right.
It'll be, no, God says, I know specifically who I want to give this to. And I got to get it. And they weren't ready to buy it before.
Right.
And by the way, you got to fix things up. And hey, by the way, now stage it because they want to give them furniture. I mean, so it's a great example that we're going to try to spend all this time on of, well, what does that look like, and what does that mean, and how do I understand it? Particularly, there's two things that people are going to have to deal with. One is, well, you say covenant and favor and blessing. Personally, Rich, I'm a believer. I haven't had much blessing in my life, so why would I pursue this and believe this? Because isn't it? Some people do and some people don't, and that's the way the church seems to function, and they kind of say that's the way life is. And why can you be assured of this? And then two is that when you're in the middle of it, which you're now moving, saying, oh, okay, this is, like you thought, well, hey, it's sold, that's a blessing. Oh no, it didn't sell. There was a consequence, a circumstance, like it seems like what I thought was going to be isn't so. Is this really not really going to be the covenant? And because you understood something, it's like, well, no, now what? When you're in the middle of it, God said the story's not over, because I've got other things that I'm arranging to pull this together so that the fulfillment of that is going to be on my timing, not on yours. And so we're going to get into that, talking about it. So let's start with the essence of it, and we talk about what is the covenant and the context of it. So read Genesis 12, 1-3, and then we'll talk about this statement as well as the what it means.
Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed."
Yep. Well, a couple cool things about it. Remember, Abraham, is living. He's got a family. He's got a wife, Sarah. And it says the Lord said to him. Okay, so think about that interesting little statement. What does that mean about Abraham?
He was listening and talking and asking God things.
Okay, so see, he had, and we don't have any full description of how it developed, but he had a relationship with God.
Right.
And he understood God, Elohim here. It's God, Elohim, Yakabah. He knows him. I'm used to talking to him.
Right.
And I have a relationship with him. Now, as far as he's concerned, Abraham at the moment, I have all my relatives around me, my father and mother, all my siblings, all my cousins. We live together, and he's enjoying it. I enjoy this. Okay, what did God tell him?
But God told him to leave, to go where he shows him.
I'm going to send you away, and this is this is an important piece of it. And I want you to go and leave. Okay, so I know what my question would have been. God said to me, "I want you to leave." What would be your question and my question? Well, where are we going?
Where? Yeah.
I'll decide to leave if you tell me where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And why.
And make it somewhere good.
Yeah. And
maybe a nice beach.
Let me process all that so I understand, where you're sending me, and God says, I'm not going to tell you that. My instruction is I'm asking you to leave. Now he says, I'm going to tell you something about this. And this is why it's called the covenant, that still, and we'll get into the depth of this, because one of the questions this properly raised, wasn't that just Abraham?
Right. Well, and there are multiple covenants within the Bible, right? In the Old Testament, there's ones that they call the Abrahamic Covenant, and I don't even remember what else, but there are some other ones.
And they're all they're all subsets. They're in essence fine print or paragraphs, which we'll talk about what this is of the covenant, which is this one. But the question that comes up, well, okay, that was to Abraham, Old Testament. Christ now, even people say, well, he said I brought a new covenant.
New covenant, right?
So this one doesn't exist anymore, right? Well, we're going to get into the truth of it. Yeah, it does. And we'll see the truth of the wonder of that. But he did say to Abraham, he said, I want you to leave. And he says, I'm going to tell you something about the essence of this. I'm going to bless you. And I'm going to make you what?
A blessing.
Okay, who's going to do that work? See,
God's going to do that work. Yes.
So he doesn't. We're going to be called to give it away, but it's him fulfilling it, like he did with your person that bought that house.
Right.
Is that okay? Well, you could say, well, Dan and I. If we're going to have this house be a blessing, then we got to make sure that the person getting it is blessed, and we got to find that out and make sure and all that. And God says, no.
Nope, I'm doing it.
All I'm asking you to do is give away the blessing. I'll show you who's the recipient of that, and I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make you. I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing, and then there's more to it, which we'll get into. And this is really hard for believers, particularly. I'm going to bless those who bless you, and I'm going to curse those who curse you. Well, that doesn't sound really good.
It's I've shared with you before. That sounds so spiteful. That's really hard to get our head around. Yeah.
And you mean God's promise is that, and we'll see what that means and what the essence of that is. This is why this series is so critical, because there's so much depth here. And don't stay, everybody who's listening, don't stay at the surface of it. But in a sense, all your questions are legitimate. Bring them up, and we're going to process through them.
And let's work through them,
because does this apply today? What does that mean that God's going to curse those? Or what does that even mean that people bless me? What's the difference with that?
Right.
And how am I made a blessing? And so he said to Abraham, the essence of my relationship with you, which is going to turn, and he says, you're going to become a nation. And through that, you'll be the father of many nations, which, by the way, translates from Israel, because he sets up Israel, to believers. And now we're all over the world recipients of the covenant, which we'll understand that, which is God's essence of relationship is I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing.
Right.
And so a couple important pieces about that is, in order for me to become a blessing to somebody, what must be true of me?
Being blessed by God.
Well, I got to receive the blessing. It says,
Yeah.
So it's a flow through. It's not a tell people about.
It's experience, and through that experience, it's also going to flow to others.
And by definition, so that it works in both aspects of that. So that if you decide to go try to bless somebody on your own, particularly when you're not receiving it, you're not giving them my blessing, and it won't turn out in the fullness of what it is. So I don't want you to tell people about the blessing. I want you to be a blessing, which means you have to receive it. And I got to show you, and this is what we're going to get in the depth of that. Because again, Americans particularly, and we know we're going beyond America, but when you say to American, you're going to be blessed, what do they tend to think of?
We go strictly to financial blessings and,
Great.
Great. Stuff.
Yeah,
stuff.
give me more stuff and more money, and great. That's great. That's blessing to me because that's how we kind of operate. And he said, no, it may include that, and we'll talk about financial freedom, but the blessing is, and we're going to define all this literally, session by session by session as we get into this. It's everything in life, all aspects of life. I'm going to give you blessingness too. And remember, and we always got to say this, it's in a world that's captivated.
That is filled with trouble.
And difficulty, which in my mind, it makes it even more significant. Is that so? And as I process this, one of my questions was, so the circumstances, the difficulty, the hardness, the uncertainty, the economics, the ridiculous culture, the governmental stuff that we don't like, that doesn't matter? And God says, no, it doesn't matter, because inside of that, which is where you are going to have to live it out,
right?
I'm gonna make you a blessing. And he gave me a great example of that as I was pondering that. He said, well, let's go back to Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They got captured,
right,
by Babylonia.
Living in Babylon, yeah.
And he even said, as part of the remnant, which we talk about, by the way, in our end time stuff, he said, Jeremiah, tell him, if you surrender and willingly go, I'm going to give you the covenant. If you choose to stay and fight, you're going to get killed, your family's going to get killed, and they're going to burn the city anyway.
Right. Which honestly sounds backwards a little bit, right?
It's like, wait a second, blessing would be you defeat Nebuchadnezzar. He said, well, I'm not, because you have not followed me, and there's consequences to that. So, but if you have a heart to go, go. So Daniel, think about, he lost his home, probably was burned, destroyed, lost the essence of life in Israel.
As he knew it,
he knew it. Lost the ability to do any of the feast, because it was done in the temple. So he couldn't do that anymore. They couldn't have celebration anymore. They couldn't even celebrate these feasts because there was no process for them to do that. And everything he was under a new regime. So in Israel, let's say, he would be similar to what we would think of freedom. He kind of had freedom to operate, and it wasn't an issue. They were very open, and they weren't authoritarian much at all. Well, he goes to Babylonia. Guess what? I got all these rules and laws, and and
freedom is not there.
And interesting enough, which we have examples in with Daniel, if you don't follow him, what does the king do? Kills you.
Well, I mean, there were even times he threatened to kill him.
Yeah, well, I'll kill you. So if you don't eat this food that I've offered to idols as part of your training, I'm going to kill you. So it's pretty rigid. And he says, well, hey, Rich, what kind of life did Daniel live? Well,
a grand life.
He lived a grand covenant life. He was blessed, and we have great examples of him becoming a blessing. And because of his blessedness, both he received it and gave it away. He kept getting promoted in a place, and it wasn't. And by the way, personally, he never got to go back to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And
there were difficulties. I mean, real difficulties that he faced in the middle of it, but God just showed off in the midst of it.
Yeah. And so he reminded me that think of that extreme situation. Did that prevent me from delivering the covenant? No. He said it's not dependent on circumstance. And he said, interesting enough, the harder things are, the more blessed you can appreciate and receive, because you know the potential. Like Daniel is like, this could be bad and our life could be over. And that in that difficulty, let me show you the fullness of the covenant, which, by the way, Daniel had to understand something. So if he said, well, okay, I want the covenant. That's good. Let's make it so we get to go back to Jerusalem right away and build the temple again and have it functioning, because that's what I think is blessing.
Right.
And God says, well, I'm going to redefine it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So don't you, and this is important as we get into the covenant, he said, don't you define what you think you want to fulfill the blessing. He said,
that's good. Yeah.
I'll give it to you, but you're going to have to let me perhaps redefine it so that, understand. Like, for example,
trust him with it, trusting his character, that what he says is good, that is best, none better.
Yeah. So we've had COVID. And one of the things about COVID was, you can't gather in churches. You can't gather. You got to lock down. You got to be socially distant. Blah 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 blah. Well, that's a change. And it seems like we've lost the essence of that life. And God says, well, let me redefine it for you. What's church all about?
Right.
Worship. It's about being in the Word, receiving the Word, having depth of truth and fellowship. He said, this hasn't stopped that.
Right.
You can do it in a different way. Let me redefine it for you and show you how to do it in a different way. And I will fulfill it for you. And so, like, for example, it goes at all different levels. So we had, last week, we had Ken Blanchard,
yes,
the 1 Minute Manager. Well, his company, the Blanchard Company, which is, he's got, I think he had like 250, 300 consultants all over the world doing work. Everything they did was live. They did training live. So they'd show up at a company and they'd be there for 2 or 3 or 4 days doing training and growing and consulting. Well, when COVID hit worldwide, guess what? Stopped.
That impacts, right.
It stopped immediately. And it was like, uh-oh.
Now what?
This could be bad. We're going to lose our customer base. We're going to lose our revenue base.
Yeah, and I think you said they were in 23 different countries or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how is that going to work? And is it over? And God said, well, and actually I'm dealing with Ken during this time, because that was one of his questions, like, and we talked about covenant. I said, well, it doesn't diminish the covenant. God wants to bless you to make you a blessing. So your question, instead of, well, God, change COVID. God, make sure we can get back to live teaching, because that's who we are.
Right.
So I want life, like Daniel could have said, well, I want life the way it was in Jerusalem, in Israel. Come on, I want that. And I said, Ken, go the other direction. Maybe he'll redefine it for you. And don't give up yet, because he hasn't spoken. And by the way, he might have you shrink the company, might even have you have no company because he's got something else for you, but are you willing to go? Yes. And so what happened was, and of course, what you and I are doing right now is we're using Zoom.
Right.
And his people started, and of course, younger people than Ken, who knows the technology. Hey,
they're pretty good at it, right?
Hey, I tell you what, we can still do this. We just have to reorient our presentation and our material, and let's do it by Zoom. And interesting enough, our audience they themselves aren't in one place either. We have to do Zoom, with 15 people, 20 people. Okay. All right. Well, let's try that. Let's see what that looks like. Well, God redefined it, actually blessed him. And there's something that was interesting discovered by his people, is that for them personally, it's way nicer to not be traveling all over the world.
Oh, interesting.
It's actually nicer to be more stable at my home with my spouse, with my children, doing these things. And by the
online.
way, we save all this time. And even because of how they were functioning, he had this big office outside of San Diego. And people
That's
said,
valuable real estate, right?
Yep. And people said, well, we can't come to work. We're going to do this, from our houses. And I don't know if you remember or have you had spent any time in California, but the traffic was unbelievably
Horrible. Yes.
bad. I mean, you could go 10 miles. It would take you an hour and a half to get 10 miles because it's so heavy.
Yeah.
And so commuting took 30 minutes, 50 minutes,
Right.
an hour, hour and a half just to get to work. Well, when you didn't have to commute, guess what? You save all that time.
Yeah, this gift of time.
So there was a gift of time. So that, as Ken said, okay, I'm willing to receive this, God reoriented the definition of it. And your business is going to look like this. And you're going to allow your people now that you can, because things have opened back up, don't require your people to have to come to work. May it be more flexible. Sometimes, you got to be face to face, but let them operate like they have been operating. Hey, by the way, and this is cool. He said because as it opened up, the potential was to go back to live teaching. And they, with their customers, said, well, why don't we just do it by electronic?
Yeah.
It's actually more effective for you and for us. And they, yeah, sure. And they accepted the new paradigm because God says, I'm going to redefine for you what it looks like. And interesting enough, what has been problematic and difficult, I'm turning into a positive. And the blessing is bigger than you think. And that's what he began to understand. So even now, he's not going back to live teaching. Yeah, he can do some, but I'm primarily going to do Zoom. So how cool is that?
That's incredible. Wow.
So he says, I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing. And he says, I'm not doing it, and this will be important. He says, don't you stop at the blessing part. So, because we all say, okay, great.
Right.
Give me the blessing. Yeah, I'd like the blessing. That'd be great. He says, well, you can't stop there. There's a reason for this, and it's to give it away. And keep understanding, everybody. It's true, it's absolute, but it's a flow through.
Right.
And the whole covenant is the flow through. It's not just the blessing piece of it.
Right.
So that if you say, okay, great, I got the blessing, but you're not willing to let God make you a blessing, flow through. Interesting enough, you lose it. Because why? Well, the covenant is the whole thing. I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing. And then he tells us, as he starts to explain this to us, he said, now let me help you understand the why of it. There's a why to this. And the first one, and this is cool, is he said, by me blessing you to make you a blessing, he says the first and most primary reason for this, God speaking, is I get to glorify myself. Not hypothetically. Not, with you talking about it, it's with reality because you're going to be living out the process.
Right.
But let me show you what
and
that
it'll be
looks like.
obvious that it is him.
Yeah. So let's go to 1 Corinthians 16.
Okay.
And
First Chronicles 16, right?
Yep. It's CHR, not COR. 1 Chronicles. So if you go there to 16, and then let me tell you how far to go to start with. We're going to go from verses 8 through 30, but we'll do it piece by piece here. So 1 Chronicles 16. This is David. He actually, it's kind of cool because it says, he said this truth is coming from David, who wrote it as a psalm. And by the way,
beautiful.
It's a song. It's expressing what psalms are, which are songs and worship of God. But he said he writes this specifically. So if you go to 8, go down to let's see, 8 through 10, and then we'll go further with that, 8 through 10.
Sure. Oh, give thanks to the Lord. Call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the peoples. Sing to him. Sing praises to him. Tell of all his wondrous works. Glory in his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice.
Okay. So he says that as we are having this work, he says, give thanks And make known what? In verse 8, make known what?
Make known his deeds, what God's doing.
Okay,
yeah.
so he's saying that glory and praise comes from you reflecting my work. And the only work you can reflect is what? The work that's happening to me.
Right, what you're experiencing.
What you're experiencing. So that, and by the way, if you don't, and you say, well, the Bible says this, and you should, but then people observe and say, well, that's not true of you.
Right.
What do we call them?
Hypocrites. Really.
Well, that you're hypocritical, and they're
sharing knowledge, but they're not sharing experience and life.
That's one of the reasons, and even I don't know if you caught this when we were with Ken, but he said, he says, I understand something is that he says people really like Christ, they just don't like Christians.
Yeah.
Because the idea of Christ is attractive, but as is reflected in most Christians, like, why would I want to do that?
Right.
Well, you're not going to be able to praise him and glorify him unless you make known his deeds, which is happening to you. And then he says, talk in verse 9 of all his what? Wondrous works. Okay, the word there is supernatural. The supernatural works that I'm going to do.
Right.
I'm going to have that work for you. And what will you do is that you'll talk about it.
Just tell people.
Just tell people. Okay, why would you tell people?
Because it's fantastic, and it's not anything you could do. You are seeing him at work, and you can't help but, it's funny even thinking about, like, if you go see a great football game and you can't help but get in conversation the next day. Did you see that play when they did this? It was amazing. And everybody's all abuzz. The same thing, is when we see God work, we can't help but tell people what he does.
Right. Okay, let's go to 11 and go down to 15.
Okay.
And then we'll describe it a little bit further, but 11 through 15.
Sure. Seek the Lord in his strength. Seek his presence continually. Remember the wondrous works that he has done, his miracles and the judgments he uttered. O offspring of Israel, his servant, children of Jacob, his chosen ones. He is the Lord our God. His judgments are on all the earth. Remember his covenant forever, the word that he commanded for 1,000 generations.
Yeah. So he says, again, remember and speak of his supernatural stuff, so that, hey, I'm at work, I'm doing the covenant stuff, and remember it and speak about it, and you're chosen, which we'll get into. What are we chosen for? He's the Lord. His judgments are in all the earth, so his truth is absolute. In verse 15 says, remember his what?
His covenant forever.
Okay, he speaks about this covenant that he's made to Abraham. I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing. I want you to remember it, and there's two statements he makes. Remember it for how long?
Forever.
Okay, now this is interesting, and by the way, remember we're in talking about in the End Times Fridays. The section we're in right now is what's it like after he destroys the earth and creates a new one.
Right.
He says, well, interesting enough, you're still going to be remembering the covenant. It's still part of the essence of life, and he says, I've commanded it for how long in verse 15?
For 1,000 generations.
Okay, how long is that? A generation, minimally.
Well past what we've got right now.
minimally is 40 years. So 1,000 generations would be 40,000.
It's at least 40,000 years, right?
40,000 years, and we're only, let's say we're into it at 6,000 years. Well, we got a ways to go.
Right.
Which I think is why it's eternal, is that it's still, see, when he makes it very precise, forever, 1,000 generations, the covenant will be operating. Yeah. So that's why we begin to realize, wait a second, so it's not as he so decides.
Right.
It's the life of God when? all the time.
Now, all the time.
All the time.
And I love even, that single verse 15, dispels the idea that the covenant is gone, that was just a moment in time. Right there, we see in his word. And I love also the thing it dispels to me. It says the word that he commanded.
Yes.
That he literally commanded this covenant.
Yes.
As he spoke it, that it's not for some, it's not just the lucky ones. It's not, this is what he has said he will do when we're walking with him. So there's just beauty in that command that it can be expected and excited about.
Yeah, very much. So as we set up the premise today is, he said, I've gave Abraham the blessing or the covenant. I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing. I'm going to bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. That's the essence of it. And remember that, and we'll get into this tomorrow, a covenant is an agreement. And there's two sides to the agreement.
Right.
So that is it God's life? Yes. Is it absolute in terms of our experiencing it? No, because we have to fulfill our piece of it. And we'll talk about that tomorrow, about what that looks like. But he says, I've commanded it. It lasts forever. It's still here. Doesn't depend on circumstances at all. I may redefine some things for you. So that, hey, Rich, your fellowship that you used to have this way before COVID, now it's going to look another way, but it could be blessed. See, it can be enjoyable, and I may redefine it, which, by the way, may be a realtering of what you understand about it. So it's a beautiful thing. The covenant's absolute. We're going to get into this. This is going to take a while. This takes several months actually to get through, of understanding the depth and all the nuances of what does this look like. And we want to introduce this because it's not really taught much and it's not understood at all by very few. So we want to help you really understand this, and we urge you to invite people to listen, because it'll change their life if they really grab hold of this. So we're excited about it, and we'll pick it up again tomorrow. Talk about the agreement. And
Excellent. Looking forward to it. That sounds great. Thank you for joining us, everyone, as we start on this new study on the covenant. Be sure to be a friend and tell a friend, and ask others to jump in on the journey here. God's got some amazing things in store. So thanks for sharing, Rich.
Yep, it's going to be exciting. We will see you tomorrow.
Sounds great. Have a great afternoon,
Thank you for
everyone.
joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.